So we're going to solve a quadratic. All right, so just a quick warm-up. I want to FOIL x minus 3 squared and x plus 4 squared. So when we multiply or evaluate the x minus 3 squared, the biggest mistake is students try to square the x and the 3, and you can't do that. X minus 3 squared means x minus 3 times x minus 3. So in this case, you'd have to FOIL. X times x is x squared. Outside is minus 3x. Inside is minus 3x, which is minus 6x. And then negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. Okay, let's do the same thing with the next one. X plus 4 squared means x plus 4 times x plus 4. When you FOIL that, what do you end up with? All right, hopefully that's what you got. All right, so that's just kind of a warm-up. Now we're going to go ahead and try to solve a quadratic by completing the square. So here's our first example. Example 1. X squared minus 6x plus 4 is equal to 0. Now if I asked you to solve this by factoring, you would ask yourself, what are the factors of 4 combined to give you negative 6? And then after a lot of work, you'd probably come up with the answer that nothing you can multiply for 4 to give you negative 6. So you can't solve this one by factoring. I also want you to take a look at our first warm-up here, and then this problem, and how they're similar in the first two terms, but the last term's a little different. If only it was plus 9, you know, we could go ahead and factor it that way. So that's kind of our goal, is to make this a 9. So here's how you do it by completing the square. First thing we need to do is get rid of that 4. So let's move it to the other side by subtracting 4. Not changing the problem, I'm just moving it to the other side. So I've got x squared minus 6x. I'm going to leave a blank there because we're trying to get 9. Equals negative 4. And because we're completing the square, I like to just put a square there, so I know that's what I'm doing. Well, here's how we get a number here. What you do is you take our b, which in this case is negative 6. You take the b and you divide it in half and then square it. We're making this happen. We're making it a perfect square. So in our little box here, our b is negative 6. We're going to take half of that and square it. Well, half of negative 6 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is 9. So I'm going to write plus 9 in this box. And look, I'm where our warm-up is. That's what we're trying to make happen. But now if I add 9 to one side, I got to make sure that I add 9 to the other side. Okay? Because if you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other. All right, so I've got a perfect square here, just like we had up here. So if I take this thing and factor it, it's the same thing as x minus 3 squared, just like our warm-up was in the beginning. Now, equals, let me finish, equals negative 4 plus 9, which is 5. Now, without having the warm-up above, if you look here, how could have I gotten 3 from this piece right here? How can I end up with 3? Something to do with b here. So if I take b and I just take half of it, remember I ended up with negative 3. So that's the number that goes there, because when you square it, you get 9, and when you double it, you get negative 6. All right, so that's the I guess the premise of completing the square. Now comes the easy part. If you want to undo squaring something, you just square root both sides. If I square root the left, you got to square root the right. These two cancel out. I'm left with x minus 3 equals, really, really important. You can't forget when you take the square root of something and when you're solving it, you could have a positive or a negative answer. That plus or minus 5 is really important. A couple of videos ago I mentioned that it's the highest exponent is squared. We got to have two answers in the end. And the only way to have our two answers if it's a positive square root of 5 or a negative square root of 5. So those are both pretty important there. Okay. So almost finished. Our goal is to solve for x, and we haven't done that yet. We've got to move that 3 to the other side. So I'm going to add 3 to the other side. So now I have x is equal to positive 3 plus or minus the square root of 5. Can you simplify the square root of 5 at all? Is there a factor of 5 that's a perfect square? Hopefully we're all saying no because it's a prime number. This is an exact answer. If you were to plug it into your calculator, the square root of 5, you'd get a decimal. Math teachers tend to like exact answers. So there you have it. Okay? Not too bad. Let's try another one. All right, here's our next one. Example 2. X squared plus 8x plus 11 equals 0. Factors of 11, if I said solve by factoring, factors of 11 that you add to give you 8. Are there any? All right, there's not. So I'm going to go ahead and complete the square. And again, you can do this on any problem. First, you need to move the 11 to the other side so we can complete the square and make this a nice perfect problem. X squared plus 8x, I'm going to leave a big box here because that's what I need to fill in, equals negative 11. I'm going to put a box on the other side as well, a square, because what I do to one side I've got to do to the left as well, right and left. Alright, so to figure out what goes in here, okay, we're going to take half of b, which is 8, and square it. Half of 8 is 4. 4 squared is 16. What I add to one side, I got to make sure I add to the other. We've got a perfect square here. And you can think to yourself, what is half of 8 when you square it gives you 16? Or what are factors of 16 combined to give you 8? Half of 8, that's what we're looking at, just like we did over here, is 4. So that's what's going to go right here. X plus 4 squared equals negative 11 plus 16, which is 5. All right, now we're at the easy part. To undo squaring something, you're going to take the square root of both sides. They cancel out. So we've got x plus 4. What's the most important thing to remember here? Plus or minus the square root of 5. You've got to remember that plus or minus so you've got both answers. Solve for x, you're going to subtract 4 from both sides. So x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 5. Just like last time, can you simplify the square root of 5? Is there a perfect square? So this is an exact answer. An approximate answer would be if you plug it in your calculator. And that's it.